1. Cal. There was something comforting about the ring of his hammer on metal, a focus that Cal could only find once he set his mind to working and shaping. The work was grueling, hot, and Huel constantly tried to cheat him when it came to pay, but he enjoyed being in the forge. He enjoyed the simple structure it offered him. Plus, as Leif and Ovette kept saying, it kept him out of trouble. Hollowborn! Oi, Hollowborn! Are you done with those blades yet? A gruff voice called from inside. If you're slacking off back there, I'll drag your hind over to the prefects myself. Don't you think I won't? I'm sticking my neck out for you and those hollowlings at the dirty orphanage. Yes, I sharpened them yesterday, Cal shouted back. Huel, the blacksmith. He was a bulbous whale of a man, an ale soaked asshole that loved to remind Cal of two things. First and foremost, that Cal was lucky to be employed, and it was only by Huel's good graces that he was able to scrape enough together to eat every day. And second, that Cal was a Hollowborn. Hollowborn. It was the Davan name for his kind, one of the unfortunate few for whom their gift never manifested. If what Leif had taught Cal was true, since his 16th birthday had come and gone 2 years ago, it was now too late for him. Other people, nearly every other person, had the ability to channel the gift. Most could only manifest it to aid with mundane tasks, but there were a few who could wield the gift to destructive ends. Those who joined the prefects, for example. Try as he might, Cal had no connection to the gift. He couldn't sense it around him, and no gift placed Cal and the others like him at the bottom rung of society. Everyone else would much rather pretend they didn't exist. Dave propaganda didn't help either. But old, piss stinking, pot bellied Huel loved to tell Cal how lucky he was, how generous it was of him to hire a Hollowborn. Generous? More like cheap labor, Cal always told himself. Huel could get away with paying Cal whatever he liked for his work. No real employment meant no real pay, which meant Cal had to be smart about the work he did. Play the game, Leif would often say. Not something Cal relished. He preferred simpler ways of dealing with his problems. Huel lumbered into the forge, swiping the back of his arm across his sweaty forehead. A small pipe, filled with whatever dried herbs Huel could get his hands on, jutted out from his mouth. With the click of his finger, he lit the pipe, as if it were nothing. His grubby hands pawed at Cal's hard work as he started gathering up the sharpened swords. The clink and clang of the swords scraping against one another and Huel's billow of stinking smoke on the leather handles made Cal's blood boil. Huel didn't care for the effort Cal had put into each blade, didn't give a thought to the meticulous care Cal had poured into the oiling of the metal, the wrapping of the handles. No, all Huel cared about was getting money for work he hadn't done and then spending that money on whatever suited his fancy. Ale, women, ale-drenched women, whatever. Cal bit his tongue and continued hammering the cooling blade he had on the anvil. The pounding of the hammer was considerably louder this time around. Prefect client'll be here soon. Got a bunch of new recruits who need cheap blades. Make sure you stay out of the sight. You know what'll happen to you if they find you're a hollow, Huel slurred. They wouldn't know, Cal snorted. Not unless you told them. Oh, they know all right, boy. They're trained to hunt riffraff like you. Cal hated it, but Huel was right. Prefects were the city's guard. You didn't like Cal and Huel. They had decided they hated their own kind and preferred to lick the hand of the Davan overlords. They were trained by the Davans to enforce their form of justice. Stick within the bounds of Davan law, and you're fine. but step 1 foot outside of it, and the prefect would be more than happy to help you disappear. That was doubly worse for Cal and the other Hollowborn. Igni and her people had no love for the Hollowborn, and the prefects would lock Cal up just for being one. Cal had heard that the other chained cities treated their Hollowborn better. Not that that helped him in any way. Huel eyed the length of a sword, ran his finger along the edge of its blade, his stupid, fat eyes bulging out of their sockets as he judged the keenness. That'll do, Huel gruffed, tossing the sword amongst the others with little care. My pay? Cal said between hammer strikes. You'll get paid when I get paid, boy, and not a moment sooner, Huel replied. You still haven't paid for the last batch I forged, Cal said, stopping his work and glaring at Huel. This song and dance again. Again. And what makes you think I should? Those blades were uneven and about as straight as a dog's hind leg. You should thank your luck that I kept you on after that mess, Huel spat. Cal set down his hammer and took off his leather apron, slowly and calmly. He stood and walked over to Huel, standing so close to the oaf that he could smell the day-old, or week-old, ale on his breath. What do you think the prefects would say if they found out a Hollowborn was the one who made their weapons? How I tainted the steel with my touch? Huh? Cal said, forcing his voice to remain level. Who do you think would be in more trouble, Huel? Me? Some street rat that no one cares about? Or you, a dodgy bottom feeder of a blacksmith who takes advantage of anyone he can? Huel's face twisted, his tiny brain not sure if it was supposed to be shocked, angry, or scared of what Cal was saying. But Cal didn't care. He wanted to get paid. Hello? Master Huel? I'm here for the pickup, a voice called from inside. The color in Huel's face drained, and any semblance of his intoxication quickly replaced with a very real dread. Shall I go introduce myself? Cal pushed. Grumbling, Huel reached into the front pocket of his apron and shoved a handful of coins into Cal's hands. Get out, Huel growled, spinning on the spot and huffing his way to the front of the store. Pleasure doing business with you, Master Huel, Cal said, grinning. He gathered his pack from the wall, placed his shoddy tools inside, and made his way out the back and into the street. Cal's pack was nothing special to look at. Leif had given it to him once he started working for Huel. It was sturdy and deep enough to hold the few tools he owned, and whatever else Cal could think to bring for the day. The coin Huel had paid Cal wasn't much, and most of it would go to the orphanage. There were always mouths to feed, clothes to buy or repair, and books so Leif could continue his lessons. After all that, it left Cal with a coin or two to his name. But he didn't mind. He liked helping out at the orphanage. It was his home, as much as it was home to the Newlittles. His family had grown over the years. What was once only him, Ovette, Leif, and the Lady Havisham was now a menagerie of runaways and rascals. Chaotic at times, but Cal wouldn't have it any other way. The sun was starting to set, coating the red clay buildings in a golden sheen. The Littles would be getting ready for bed soon, but not before Ovette's story time. She was better with them than Cal was. She listened, had patience, used her words. But before Cal could return home, he had to settle the grumble in his stomach, since he knew full well that Lady Havisham would have conveniently forgotten to make enough stew for him. Typical. Bogdan's bar was in the same direction as the orphanage, and if Cal kept to the alleyways and used the back entrance, Bogdan shouldn't have any trouble serving him, especially not when Cal could pay this time. The Embers district of Igni really existed in its crisscrossing alleyways. It had a main thoroughway that connected the Stokes District Gate to the smelt mine entrance at the bottom of the volcano. That throughway was always lined with stalls and stores, but Cal rarely took that path. Everyone knew everyone in the Embers. A tight knit community of hardy miners and loyal citizens was the Davin slogan, a line repeated on the many fading posters that covered the building's clay walls. A community that Cal didn't want anything to do with. People here, people everywhere, were too happy to kiss the boots of the Davins and the prefects who enforced their laws. They'd happily sell out their neighbor for the mere chance of being rewarded. They'd traded freedom for convenience long ago, bought all the lies the Davins told them, and Cal hated them for it. So Cal kept to the back streets, avoiding the stares and judgment from the people of the Embers. They all knew who he was, what he was, and while most would simply turn their backs or shoo him away from their stalls, there were a few who delighted in tormenting the helpless. Not that Cal was helpless. He followed the alleyways, taking a familiar path to the back of Bogdan's bar, rapping on the back door as soon as he arrived. Hunger had a way of making him impatient. Well, more impatient. Bogdan! Cal called out, not wanting to wait around. The alleyways offered plenty of shadows to hide in, especially this late in the day. Great for someone trying to stay out of sight, but not so great for the mark they were trying to hide from. Cal was all too aware of the shadows around him, and he was paranoid that the clink of coin in his pack would attract the wrong kind of attention. Bogdan! Come on! Open up! Cal called out again. The back door swung open, and Bogdan, a man as tall and thick as a mountain, greeted Cal with a stare that bordered on aggression. I told you not to come back here without money, Bogdan said, his grimace accompanied by a hand the size of Cal's head stroking the side of his neck. Cal didn't bother to reply, not with words at least. He fished through his pack and drew out two of the coins Huel had just given him. He raised them up to Bogdan, who quickly snatched them out of his hands and slammed the door. Oi! Cal shouted. What are you doing? A few moments later, the back door swung open again, and Bogdan shoved a satchel into Cal's chest, the force pushing him back a few steps and knocking the wind out of him. You'll get no more, and you didn't get this from me. Now get before someone sees you, Bogdan said, slamming the door shut once more. Bootlicker! Cal called back. Bogdan didn't treat him any differently from the other citizens of Igni, and Cal knew he shouldn't let it get to him. He should follow Ovette's example and rise above it, as Lady Havisham constantly told him. But he couldn't help himself. He hated how they treated him and Ovette. It wasn't their fault they couldn't feel the gift. His hunger stronger than his anger, Cal tore open the satchel. His empty stomach sank as he looked down at more food than 2 coins worth. 2 loaves of bread, slices of cured meat, half a wheel of cheese, and a small flask of some liquid that Cal desperately hoped was Bogdan's famous, or infamous, ale. The burning fire in his chest ceased, as if his anger had been flushed from his system. He felt cold and stupid, but more than anything, he was hungry. Cal tucked into the food, eating just enough to feel full, or as close to full as he could while leaving enough for the others. He popped the cork off the flask and took a long swig. The honey-sweet ale washed over his tongue. He was tempted to drink it all right then and there. It had been too long since he'd tasted any, but he resisted. Cal wasn't the only fan of the ale in the orphanage. It would make a nice treat for Leif. Might even get Lady Havisham to leave him alone for a night, if he gave it to her. It was getting late, so Cal decided to walk through the main streets and back to the orphanage. It was quicker than the winding alleyways, and most people would have packed up for the night. He could make it back in time to give Leif the food and maybe listen in on either him or Ovette telling the littles a story. Raised voices ahead drew Cal's attention. The voices were familiar, as was the topic of the debate. Cal picked up his pace, heading in the direction of the shouting, already certain that he was going to hit someone or get himself. Same as any other day. Cal rounded the street corner and was greeted by the sight of Roscoe, one of the older kids from the orphanage, on the ground. Three others surrounded him, laughing and kicking dirt into his face. Two of them were built similarly to Bogdan, with arms as thick as tree trunks, a not uncommon sight in a district of miners. The third was smaller, standing a few inches shorter than his counterparts, his posture no less threatening or arrogant. Cal knew the smaller lad well. Jord. Cal knew him very well. Jord was the son of some rich merchant from the Stokes district. He came from the kind of family that delighted in making money off the backs of other people, honest or otherwise. The kind of family that spawned righteous entitlement as often as children. It didn't matter to them. All they cared about was money and people who had money. Any that didn't were nothing more than tools or obstacles. Roscoe lay terrified on the floor, his hand outstretched, trying to halt whatever punishment Jord had decided Roscoe deserved. Maybe that'll teach you to talk back to your betters, hollow scum, Jord spat, kicking up more dirt at Roscoe. I'm not hollow, Roscoe cried back. His lip was bleeding, and his already dirty clothes were covered in a fresh layer of muck. Of course you are, Jord laughed. Everyone knows that old man only takes in the broken and discarded. That's not true, Roscoe said, trying his best to back away from his aggressors. Are you calling me a liar? Jord snapped. No, but I am calling you an asshole. Cal walked forward and positioned himself between Roscoe and Jord. Jord's face lit up, excited by the prospect of revenge against Cal. Oh, look who it is. King Hollow, Jord said, poking his finger into Cal's chest. What? Nothing to say? Jord continued. He'd stepped forward and was now inches from Cal. It would be so easy, too easy, to hit him square in the jaw. It wouldn't be the first time Cal had come to blows with Jord, but he didn't like the look of the two others Jord had brought with him. Figures that a coward like him would bring some muscle along. Get out of my face, Cal snarled, digging his fingers into his palm. Jord laughed out loud in response, turning to tap the back of his hand against the barreled chest of one of the mountains behind him. You hear that, Ding? King Hollow thinks he can give me orders. Me, Jord said. Yeah. Din grunted in a voice that told Cal everything he needed to know about his level of intelligence. How did Cal always end up in situations like these? It was clear from the clawing of Roscoe's hands at the back of his shirt and the scowls splayed across his opponent's faces that Cal wasn't getting out of this unscathed. Any attempt to de escalate the situation was pointless. The back of Jord's palm began to glow, and a small runic symbol appeared, pulsing a mix of dull red and blue. Jord had taken to his gift well. For as long as Cal could remember, Jord had rubbed the fact that he was better than Cal in his face. Well dressed with slick-backed blonde hair, well fed with a healthy glow to his cheeks, and well liked for reasons that were beyond Cal. To Igni and everyone in it, Jord was everything Cal was not. If you get down on your knees and beg for forgiveness, then maybe I'll let you leave without setting those dirty rags you call clothes on fire, Jord said, his grin stretching across his oh so punchable face. Not happening. You've got no right being here, hollow-born scum, barked the other of Jord's oafs, taking a step forward. Cal had seen him around. Big, burly, and just as brainless. Careful, Teston, said Din. I hear them hollows can steal your gift if you let them touch you. Make you like one of them. Really? Even the little ones? I'm not Hollowborn, Roscoe cried from behind Cal, suddenly finding his voice. Are we going to do this or not? I have places I need to be, Cal said. He tried his best to sound calm and collected, but he could feel the twitches in his body, the nervous energy that gathered in his muscles before a fight. He loved that feeling. It made him feel alive. Cal hadn't started this situation, hadn't helped to calm it down, but he definitely hadn't started it. It had been a long and frustrating week, and George's symmetrical face was the perfect outlet for those frustrations. Hitting George wouldn't help out the orphanage in any way. It wouldn't bring Cal any closer to figuring out yet another way to screw with the Davins or the prefects. But it would feel good. It would feel really good. Besides, Jord and all the other giftlings like him relied too much on the gift. They used it for everything. Every simple little thing. It was up to someone like Cal to show them just how weak that reliance was. What's the matter, Jord? Not used to someone willing to fight back? Cal continued, balling his hands into fists and taking a step forward. Much to Cal's delight, Jord backed away, between Teston and Din. Your white-haired freak of a girlfriend won't be here to save you this time. What was her name again? Queen Hollow? Jord laughed. Teston, get this piece of smelt trash out of my sight. Teston held up his palm, his fingers limed with red gift, and released a burst of flame. Cal threw up his arms as the flames crashed into him. Weak as the flames were, they still singed something fierce, like open skin catching a plume of boiling steam. Cal stepped back, pushing Roscoe to the ground once again. He gritted his teeth against the pain. He would not give these bastards a satisfaction. The attack brought back much of George's previous bravado. He stepped out from behind Din, his shit-eating grin having returned. Father says your kind are a disease, a mistake, and that you need to be stamped out, George said, a particularly irksome vein bulging in his neck as his excitement grew. Why leave it up to the prefects? We are doing this city a service. Isn't that right, lads? Yeah, doing the city a service, Teston repeated, not taking his gaze off Cal. Beads of sweat ran down the side of Teston's face. It would be a few seconds before he could channel the gift again, but a few seconds was all Cal needed. Cal ducked low and bolted forward, that nervous energy propelling him like a coiled spring. Stamping one foot into the ground, he unhooked his pack and swung it high. Teston let out a sharp cry as the pack and the heavy tools contained within collided with his chin, sending him stumbling back into Jordan Din. Come on! Cal shouted as he spun. He grabbed Roscoe by the arm and began sprinting toward the nearest alleyway. What are you idiots doing? Jord yelled. Get off me! After him! Cal didn't have time to look back. He needed to create some distance between himself and Jord. Jord's pathetic display of power was enough to send Roscoe into a fit of panic, and even now, his sobbing wasn't making things easier. But Roscoe was smart enough to know what would happen if they were caught, and smart enough to know how to get away. You had to be smart living in the embers. The dull snap of wood above Cal told him all he needed to know about any onlookers they might have had. Even those who had been in the midst of hanging clothes out to dry ran inside, preferring to remain oblivious. No one wanted to come to the defense of a Hollowborn. Not that it mattered. It wouldn't take Cal long to lose Jordan here. Wouldn't take him long to lose anyone, for that matter. He reckoned he knew these back alleys better than anyone else in the city. He felt more at home here than in most other places. He was a street rat, after all. It wasn't long before George's cries of anger at losing his prey were drowned out by the discord of the embers. Cal slowed his pace. It wouldn't be long before they were back at Leif's orphanage, so there was no need to rush. The buildings in this part of the embers mostly looked the same: clay walls, runoff from the smelt mines that made excellent building materials, were roofed with whatever the residents could get their hands on. To the untrained, it was a never ending maze of red, but to Cal, it was home. Even the prefects had started avoiding this part of the city, something about the dregs that lived there not being worth their time. That suited Cal just fine. The fewer Dave and lapdogs he had to deal with, the better. Roscoe trudged alongside Cal, his sobs degraded to long, wet sniffs. I'm sorry, Cal. What for? I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to help out, like you do. Like I do? Roscoe dug into a shallow pocket and produced a handful of coin. Where did you get that? Cal asked, already knowing the answer. Found it, Roscoe murmured, his gaze locked on the ground. Uh-huh. And let me guess. Jordan, those two barely talking slabs of meat found you finding this, Cal said. He wasn't sure if he was impressed by the amount, for a first timer, or disappointed that Roscoe had been stealing. So let me get this straight, Cal continued, coming to a halt. That little commotion that I just saved you from was actually your fault to begin with? Roscoe didn't reply, just wrung his hands in shame. This wasn't Cal's area of expertise when it came to the orphanage. Helping the littles grow into good people just wasn't a problem he was good at solving. He was far better at dealing with the Georges of the city. If there was a problem that could be hit, then Cal was your guy. But when it came to teaching someone right from wrong, where was Ovette when Cal needed her? Is this the first time? Cal asked, forcing his voice to be gentle and calm. Yes, Roscoe mumbled. Really? Roscoe didn't answer again. Well, your technique clearly needs work, and you really need to have some kind of escape plan if you're going to steal in broad daylight. Roscoe shifted slightly, scuffing the dirt with his boot. You could teach me to be like you. You do not want to be like me. Trust me, Cal said. Why not? Roscoe chimed back, his voice a little louder this time. Ovette says you're always looking out for us. She did? Yeah. She said you're always busy making sure no one bad comes to the orphanage, Roscoe said, now looking up at Cal, hopeful and maybe a little desperate. She said that if we're ever in trouble, then we should find you, that you'll always be there for us, because we're a family. Roscoe stared up at Cal with his big brown eyes. Innocent, untainted. Igny had written him off as just another child vagrant. He and all the kids like him meant nothing to the Davins. No parents, no hope, no purpose. Even those who had the gift weren't much use unless they showed aptitude for some kind of work. The only other option was to become the Gyfted, something Cal was certain Leif had just told the children to give them some kind of hope. Cal didn't have it in him to tell Roscoe that he was planning on leaving and planning on convincing Ovette to leave with him, too. Some of the littles wouldn't be so little soon. A few of them had even started showing signs of the gift. The orphanage didn't need two Hollowborn making things harder for them. So instead, Cal forced a smile and ruffled Roscoe's hair. Let's just get back home, okay? And I'll make you a deal. If you get back there before me, then I won't tell Lady Havisham about what you've been up to. Appeased, Roscoe raced off in the direction of the orphanage, all but forgetting the scuffle he'd just been involved in, and Cal followed behind, the conversation having left an ache in the back of his throat. Cal ushered Roscoe through the front door, the waft of Lady Havisham's stew greeting him. Roscoe skipped ahead, the trials of the day melting away at the promise of a full belly. The orphanage had changed little over the years, the only addition being the amount of people in it. The once empty space was now alive with activity, with littles running back and forth or cooped up together in the cubbyholes that dotted the room. Lady Havisham barking at someone had about something they did wrong. Leif's chesty chuckle echoing from his office turned school. It was noisy and messy, pure chaos at the best of times. It was home. Cal swallowed back the ache in his throat and made his way through the various piles of littles in his way. Some greeted him, others were deep into whatever imaginary game they were playing. Lady Havisham! Roscoe ran up to Lady Havisham and buried his face in her. She tried her best to shoo him away, but that only encouraged him to smush into her apron's dirty brown smudges even more. Be off with ye! You'll dirty yourself even more than you already is. Everybody loved Lady Havisham, and not just the orphans. Everyone. Cal couldn't recall a time when anyone had said a bad word about her. Anyone other than himself, that is. To him, she was bossy, motherly, overbearing, always telling folk what was right and what was wrong. She had an uncanny ability to insert herself into everyone's life, and on more than one occasion, Cal had been on the receiving end of one of her lectures. Still, she was part of the orphanage. Even Cal had to admit that the place wouldn't be the same without her. With an overemphasized grunt, she pried Roscoe off her and shooed him in the direction of the other kids playing nearby. Patting herself down, she regarded Cal with a look he was all too familiar with. Got yourself in more trouble, I take it. No more than usual. Cal wasn't in the mood for another lecture. Besides, Cal was already thinking of a plan to teach Jord a lesson, although plan might have been a strong word. Whatever elaborate scheme Cal thought he would just end up with him getting into a fistfight. It always did. You're supposed to be a role model for the little uns. You can't go around swinging your fists into every problem that comes your way. Yeah, well, you'll be pleased to hear that there was no actual fist swinging today. I sure there wasn't. Besides, I'm not fit to be anyone's role model. Missing that key ingredient, remember? She shook her head and turned back to her cooking. There's more to a person than their gift. Yeah, well, try telling the rest of the city that, Cal snapped. His voice had more venom than she probably deserved, but she had no idea what it was like. She'd lived with her gift for decades. Fit nicely into the Daven idea of a good little citizen. Whereas Cal was treated worse than someone's shit someone had stepped in. Look, I don't want to argue with you. Can you tell Leif I stopped by? Tell him yourself. She jerked her head in the direction of Leif's voice and returned her attention to her duties. Cal slammed down the meager coin Huel had given him earlier that day and left without another word. To call the space a living room was a bit of a stretch. Leif had set it up to resemble a classroom more than anything. And to be honest, to say Leif was teaching the kids anything was just as much of a stretch. Cal found Leif in the middle of animatedly regaling the kids with one of his many, many stories. They ranged from being about chivalrous heroes of old, defending the people from monstrous threats, to quick-witted thieves with hearts of gold. When Cal was younger, he'd imagined himself being a hero from one of his tales, riding into the embers on a flaming dower, freeing the people from whatever shadowy menace he could think of that day. But Cal had grown older since then. The realities of the world clearer to him now. The shadowy threats were real. He saw them every day. They had already won. The Davins had invaded Eudos hundreds of years ago. The books occupying every nook and cranny of this orphanage offered little in the way of explaining their arrival. Not like it really mattered. The Davins took whatever they wanted. Their technology was more advanced. Their culture was far more sophisticated, if you believed the orators who proffered promises of peace and wealth to all the good Eudans who accepted their lot in life. It was the Davins who spouted the bullshit about Hollowborns being a mistake. The Davins who instilled fear into the hearts of every giftling and child about not receiving their gift. No one was coming to save them. Eudos didn't deserve to be saved. Cal, are you listening to me? A tug from below snapped Cal back into the room. Leif had finished his tale, and the rest of the children had noticed his presence. Prissa clung to Cal's pants, the fabric bunched up in her tiny, frail hands. Leif says it's rude to ignore people. Sorry, Prissa. What did you say? Cal replied, pasting a smile on his face and pulling his pulse back to a normal, less frantic rhythm. Leif said that great knight Irthus saved a village of Hollowborn people from a monster. What's an Hollowborn? It means exactly what it sounds like. You're born without the gift. You're hollow. I never seen you use the gift. Does that mean you're a Hollowborn? Prissa asked in innocence. Yeah, I am. Cal tried to keep his tone neutral and was grateful for the fact that Prissa was too young to understand the nuances of emotion. He reminded himself that there was nothing wrong with being curious. But I don't have the gift either. Does that mean I'm an Hollowborn like you? No, you're not old enough to receive your gift yet. You'll have to wait a few more years yet. Roscoe is older, and he doesn't have a gift yet. What's with all the questions all of a sudden? And why are you so worried about who does and doesn't have the gift? You're years away from getting yours. How old are you again? 3? 4? I'm 9. With a huff, she stamped her foot and tugged harder on his pants. What? Cal replied, putting on his best playful tone. When did you get so big? Prissa turned away and crossed her arms, intent on continuing her huffiness. It was normal for the older kids to be worried about when they'd receive their gift. But Prissa shouldn't be thinking about stuff like that. Not yet. Trying to distract her was the best Cal could do for her. In 3 short years, she'd be under the scrutiny of every nosy, well-wishing neighbor. And the older she got without being able to channel anything, the less well-wishing those neighbors would become. Until eventually, she'd pass her 16th birthday, and any goodwill toward her would disappear. Every kid went through the same thing. The way you're treated for the rest of your life is basically decided by chance. The system was rotten. Cal wished someone would come along and do something about it. But until then, he'd just continue to do his best. Distract the littles with dumb playfulness. Because what else did someone like him have to offer? If Roscoe gets his gift, do you think he'll share it with me? I I don't want to be Hollowborn. Prissa turned back, her big brown eyes brimming with tears. It stung that even so young, she was afraid of being like Cal. She had every right to be afraid. She was young, not stupid. That's not how the gift works. Sorry, Priss, Cal said. He bent down, matching her eye level. Not that it mattered. Her gaze on him had broken, replaced by intense pouting and sniffing. Upsetting the littles again, are we, Cal? Leif said, limping over to join the conversation. His voice was always so soothing whenever Prissa and the rest of the littles were around. He'd spent years perfecting the art of injecting his voice with just the right amount of fatherliness and lecture. Funny how Cal only ever remembered the lecture part. Cal said, I can't share Roscoe's gift when he gets it. Leif winced as he knelt down. Cal couldn't remember a time when Leif didn't limp around, but in recent years, it was worse. Cal had lost count of how many times he'd asked him about it as a child, but Leif's answer had always been something different. Always some wild story about his younger days wandering Eudos. Eventually, Cal had just given up. Leif wrapped his arms around Prissa and pulled her in tight, and just like all the others, she melted in his arms, bearing her sobs and his ragged tunic. Come now, Prissa. You told me you were a big girl, huh? And big girls don't cry. Besides, you don't need Roscoe's gift. You'll get your own one day. But what if I don't? If Roscoe shares his with me, I won't have to be hollow-born. Cal's right, Prissa. The gift can't be shared, Leif said. Leif was a father to everyone who lived here, the only one most had ever had. It dawned on Cal that he didn't know the reason why Leif ran the orphanage, why he took all these kids in. Not that he wasn't good at it, the opposite, in fact. But thinking back, Cal didn't think he'd asked him why he did what he did. His childhood had been full of questions about who his parents were and why the prefects were so interested in patrolling the area around the orphanage. The answer to both had always been the same: I don't know. Cal may not know why Leif ran the orphanage, but he did know one thing: Leif was a terrible liar. Leif stroked Prissa's hair as she continued to rub her face up against his chest. Besides, what's so wrong with being hollowborn? Cal's hollowborn, same as Ovette. But Ovette told me she wanted to share her gift with Cal. Through mumbles and hiccups, Cal almost missed what she said. Ovette was hollowborn, like him, the only person who really understood what it was like to be him. She didn't have a gift. She would have told him if she did. Pris, what do you mean Ovette wanted to share hers with me? She doesn't have a gift. Cal's mouth felt dry as he spoke. He felt breathless, like his heart had decided to stop for a second. Prissa was wrong. She had to be. Ovette would have said something. She would have. I saw her playing with it on the roof. A white light came from her hand and made the vegetables get bigger, she said, completely matter of fact, innocently unaware of how wrong it was for Ovette to keep this to herself. She saw me watching her. I thought she was going to be angry that I was out of bed, but she was smiling. The color drained from Leif's face. He broke out of his parental embrace and held Priss at arm's length, his wide eyes boring holes into the frail little girl. Cal knew why he felt annoyed, but why did Leif care? Wasn't he happy for Ovette? What color did you say her gift was, Prissa? Leif sputtered. His words were clipped, lacking that fatherly charm. White? You're sure? Yeah, I saw it. It was dark, so it was easy to see. Prissa's eyes darted from Leif's to Cal's, while Leif continued to stare intently into her, his fingers tight around her shoulders. She's. she's. No. Leif muttered to himself. He'd let go of Prissa and begun to stand. You old fool. How did you not see this? The signs were there. Prissa took this as a sign of trouble and buried her face into Leif's leg. I'm sorry, Leif. I didn't mean to stay up past curfew. I heard a noise and I saw Ovette, and I followed her up to the roof and her words died out, her sobbing returning for round two. Leif snapped back to himself, quickly kneeling again to comfort Prissa. Hey, hey, hey! You didn't do anything wrong. But listen, I need to have a talk with Cal, okay? Can you run and ask Lady Havisham when supper will be ready? He held Prissa at arm's length again, his expression gentle and fatherly once more. Can you do that for me? Prissa murmured and nodded her head. As good a reply as Leif was going to get through all the sobbing. As she scampered off, Leif grabbed Cal by the shoulder and pushed him into the small space he used as an office. What? What are you doing? Leif? Cal sputtered. Cal, you need to listen to me, he said, locking the office door. If what Prissa just said is correct, Ovette is in trouble. What? Why? So she got her gift. Good for her, right? Cal didn't want to look at Leif. Didn't want him to see how much this was getting to him. How could she keep this from him? Had she been lying to him all this time? Cal, you need to trust me. Ovette needs your help. You need to find her and bring her back here, Leif said, a pit opened in Cal's stomach as he stared at Leif. He'd never seen him like this before. Gone was the father. Gone was the lecturer. Instead, here stood an old man, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing an expression of panic. Leif, what's going on? Why are you so worried? The pit sank deeper. Cal, Ovette isn't just some giftling. She's the Gyfted.